Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, taking a look at a high court decision on Trump cuts, plus did officials get forecasting right last week ahead of Texas floods, and a group looks into bringing back an extinct New Zealand bird. The Supreme Court yesterday sided with the Trump administration for now when it comes to large-scale staff cuts. I spoke with USA Today Supreme Court correspondent Maureen Grappi for more. Hello, Maureen.
Hello.
All right, so Maureen, what did the court decide here?
The court said that the administration can move ahead with its plans for large-scale layoffs and restructuring at multiple federal agencies. It was a short opinion, which is common in these opinions, which come from what's called the emergency docket, these quick appeals to the Supreme Court. But the justices noted that they were not ruling on whether any specific plan for an agency is legal. They only said that the federal judge who had blocked the administration from moving forward in all cases should not have done so.
All right, and walk us through the arguments from the majority and the dissenting side on this, if you would.
Well, the underlying issue is whether the changes are so great that agencies can't function as Congress intended. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said she agreed to lift this judge's hold because the justices right now don't have a way of determining whether that's happening at each of the agencies. We only got one dissent. That was from another of the liberal justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she said the district judge considered a lot of evidence that the judge determined showed that the programs Congress set up are struggling because of the changes at agencies.
And Maureen, what had a U.S. district judge in San Francisco decided previously here?
She said that the changes that the administration wanted to make had to be paused while this litigation goes through the courts to determine if these actions are legal. She had said that the approximately 20 affected agencies don't appear to be able to function as Congress intended under what the administration wants to do. And one example she gave was that Congress had established the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, but the administration wants to eliminate nearly all of its 222 employees. And the Social Security Administration, which was also established by Congress, has struggled to respond to Social Security recipients since the administration began cutting staff.
What did lawyers for the unions and other challengers argued to the court?
They said it was important for the court to pause actions in the meantime while this litigation is going on because it'll be too hard to restore the agencies even if their challenge is ultimately successful. The quote that they used to the Supreme Court was that there will be no way to unscramble that egg.
And did we get any response from the Trump administration after this move from the high court?
Yes, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, she praised the court's decision, and she said that the justices had stopped lawless lower courts from restricting Trump's authority over the federal workforce. She said on social media that federal agencies can now become more efficient than ever.
Well, we expect the court to wind down for the summer. What's next for this case going forward?
Well, the court will continue to act on emergency appeals. And in fact, we still have one pending, a related case about changes to one specific agency, the Education Department. So we're waiting to hear whether the Supreme Court says that the restructuring there, the pretty much elimination of that department in all but name only, can continue. For these other federal agencies, the groups that are challenging the changes, they vowed to keep fighting. And so we're likely to see specific challenges to plans at specific agencies.
Maureen Grappi covers the Supreme Court for USA Today. Thanks, Maureen.
Thanks for having me.
As of early this morning, we know of at least 109 deaths linked to last week's Texas floods, and more than 180 people remain missing. That includes 5 girls and a camp counselor from Camp Mystic, which was ravaged by the storm, killing dozens of children there. Among the tens of thousands of government employees impacted by the Supreme Court's ruling Maureen and I talked about are NOAA employees, with the exclusion of an elite cohort of employees who are part of the Commissioned Officer Corps. But did cuts have anything to do with preparedness for floods last week? That's a more complicated question. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Dinah Voiles-Pulver for more. Thank you, as always, for joining me, Dinah.
Happy to be here, Taylor.
So, Dinah, what actually caused this storm system and the subsequent flooding? What do we know as of now? What did you hear from meteorologists?
One phrase that they're all using a lot is perfect storm. It was just a circumstance where several things came together at once in the worst possible way. Tropical Storm Barry had made landfall a few days earlier in Texas. The moisture and some of the storms related to Barry were moving north into Texas. Meanwhile, a few days earlier, there had also been this moisture from Flossie from the Pacific side that had moved into the region. There was a lot of moisture in the air. And the one balloon launch they did, they had near record levels of moisture in the atmosphere. At the same time, there was a low-level jet in the upper atmosphere that was also moving through. And the terrain there where they are in that section of Texas, it slopes up in something that they call an escarpment. When the land slopes up like that and a weather system comes across, it can provide the lift, and that lift creates instability that creates storms. So with the storms and the moisture in the environment, it just collaborated together to make this incredible rainfall.
Well, Dinah, this week, a lot of folks are wondering kind of what happened with the forecasting last week. How accurate were the forecasts ahead of these floods, and do experts feel information was spread, I guess, quickly enough by officials?
Well, the people who are familiar with how the National Weather Service works feel very confident that the National Weather Service was doing what it could to get the information out there in time. They were warning 2 or 3 days ahead, they warned that there was going to be rain. The day before, on the 3rd, they were saying there could be flash flooding and there could be up to 5 to 7 inches of rain. The rain was indeed, in some places, higher than 7 inches. But in some places it was lower. And that's one of the challenges for the National Weather Service, is that they do not have the kind of models that can exactly predict exactly where a storm is going to fall. So it's generally understood that if they say 5 to 7 inches of rain in an isolated location, then the rain could be even higher than that. They were putting out these forecasts and warning several counties that there could be flash flooding and that people should be aware. And I think one of the biggest questions here going forward is going to be, what exactly did the local officials do with the information they got from the National Weather Service? There's been some debate about when the warnings were issued, and some people say that they got warnings on their phone. Other people say they, were saying they didn't get warnings. So there's a lot of questions left to be answered yet about what they knew and when and how that information was disseminated to people. This is an issue that comes up again and again in our country after extreme rainfall events.
Well, you and I, Dinah, have talked right here on the show plenty about Trump administration cuts and their potential impact on weather forecasting and more in this area. Did Weather Service cuts have an impact here? What do we know as of now?
We do know that they called in extra people and the offices are short-staffed. They have several vacancies in the San Antonio, Austin National Weather Service office, and those have come about because of the probationary layoffs and the incentivized retirements. Some of the experts I talked to expressed concern about the overall atmosphere in the Weather Service, with morale at maybe an all-time low because of the numbers of positions that have been lost.
Dinah, should we be thinking about what happened last week as an isolated freak weather event, or is this part of a broader climate conversation?
This is definitely part of a broader climate conversation. We have seen evidence in the NOAA records of an increase in the number of these sorts of extreme rainfall events. They may occur less often than they used to because we also have longer droughts. But when we do get these record rainfall events, they have more water. We've seen this happen in Vermont. We saw this happen in Minnesota last summer. We've seen it happen in Tennessee, and we've seen it happen in Kentucky. Anything that comes across the Gulf is pulling in more moisture because the Gulf is warmer. It's proven science that a warmer atmosphere holds more water. So when these systems come in off the Gulf over Texas, over Louisiana, they've got more water typically than they would have maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And you see that reflected in many of the rainfall records. Many of the rainfall records in the entire arc from Texas to the Northeast reflect that their heaviest rainfalls have been in the last 30 years. And scientists definitely link that to the warming Gulf and warming temperatures overall.
Great. Another fascinating piece from you, Dinah. Folks should go check out the full version with the link in today's show notes. Dinah Voles-Pulver covers the climate and environment for USA Today. Thank you, Dinah.
Thanks, Taylor.
President Donald Trump is expected to visit Texas on Friday. While Harvard University has become a favorite punching bag of President Trump, the massive tax and spending bill he signed last week is about to deal the school another blow. The law raised taxes on the endowments of the wealthiest colleges and universities in the U.S. from 1.4% to as much as 8%. Harvard, which has already been cut off from billions in federal funding since Trump regained office, is one of a handful of schools hardest hit by the new tax burden. As a result of the policy shift, Harvard could potentially lose hundreds of millions of dollars a year. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Film director Peter Jackson wants to bring back a long-extinct bird species in his native New Zealand. He's an investor in Colossal Laboratories and Biosciences, the private firm that recently brought back a modern-day incarnation of the direwolf and is working to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. And the Lord of the Rings director told USA Today he asked the group why they're not focused on the moa. And they've now announced a new project to do just that. The giant flightless bird went extinct in New Zealand some 600 years ago. You can read more about what this project will entail and what the bird looked like with a link in today's show notes. And later today, President Trump's budget priorities were signed into law on our nation's birthday, July 4th. Among the biggest and perhaps most contentious policies, billions earmarked to fund Trump's mass deportation strategy.
There are earmarks in there to hire at least 10,000 new ICE agents, new CPP agents, expand detention spaces, $46 billion for construction of the wall, the southern border. So this is really going to amplify and fund the president's interest in a mass deportation campaign.
Now, as USA Today senior Congress reporter Riley Beggin, tune in later today, beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, to hear her full conversation with my colleague Dana Taylor on who the bill's winners and losers are. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.